In this month's magazine, we dug into some of the personalities and some of the policies that are driving real estate right now. So we talked to Ryan Serhant, the celeb broker whose persona helps drive his firm's sales and success. On the other hand, we looked at a title insurer where leaders' desire to get deals done for their clients has put them in a little bit of hot water. On the other hand, with the election coming up, we laid out our presidential candidates' real estate policies and took a look at what elections really mean for real estate. Plus, we took a look back at a particular policy that's had a big effect on the syndication boom. Watch for more, and you can read all of these stories online now on The Real Deal. So Sheridan, you wrote our cover story this month, which is a profile on Ryan Serhant. Tell me why now was the time to profile him.
So right now is kind of a really pivotal time for Ryan and the business. 4 years since they've founded, he's kind of gone from 11th in our rankings to 6th, which is a pretty big jump. And they're also in the midst of an East Coast expansion, so they're opening up in new markets. He just launched in June a reality show about him and some of the other agents at his firm. It's on Netflix. So it's kind of like a confluence of a lot of factors right now for the business. And kind of the central question is, can they bring that to other markets? Can they bring on more agents? And can that infrastructure kind of withstand that growth?
Yeah, and they've been scaling for a little while. I'm interested in the show itself. How do you think the show, which is called Owning Manhattan, has influenced the business, whether here in New York or in their expansion?
Reality TV is kind of a formula Ryan's used before. He was on $1 Million Listing New York, and obviously that kind of like propelled his career and made him one of the top agents in New York. So this is something he's familiar with, and he certainly kind of understands the benefits of it. It's a lot of exposure, which can be a really good thing for a brokerage, especially if you're moving into new markets and you need that name recognition, you need the brand recognition. Maybe people who weren't familiar with Serhant outside of New York might now be in some of these smaller markets that he's in. If you ask him, it's already bringing in business and listings. Of course, that remains to be seen, and we'll keep watching it. But his kind of take on it is that it's a net positive, and for most of the agents I spoke to, they seem to think that it's working out well for them too.
Yeah. So what are the challenges that Ryan or the firm Serhant still has to overcome?
Yeah. So they are only 4 years old, which is still pretty early on. Their expansion started last spring, so they're kind of only a year into that. So they still need to solidify their footholds in these other markets, and they're going to need to kind of bring on the right talent, the right agents that can kind of help sustain the business. So Ryan, he has kind of a reputation for bringing in a lot of big listings and a lot of big business. But as the brokerage gets bigger and bigger, it's going to be harder for him to kind of be at the center of everything. And so he's going to have to keep agents there and grow them that can bring in their own business and can kind of sustain that flow. He also wants to keep selling. So, if he wants to stay at the top, then he's going to have to, continue to bring in those big closings and those big listings. And, he actually just lost his biggest one. One of the kind of central plot points of the show is that he's trying to sell this Central Park Tower penthouse. At the time, it was $250 million. More recently, it was $195 million. And that was kind of a thread that, he and the agents followed throughout the show. And that penthouse was brought off the market in July. So don't know what's happening with that, but it doesn't seem like he's on top of it anymore. But, he still is doing, a fair amount of business.
So obviously throughout the course of reporting this profile, you've had a lot of conversations with Ryan and people around him. What stood out to you about, Ryan himself in all of your conversations with him?
He definitely has this kind of work obsessed, kind of nonstop hustler mentality. And I think that's pretty evident in person as well. That didn't necessarily surprise me, but I think there is this kind of undercurrent of anxiety that it was a little interesting to me to kind of pick apart with him about what makes him nervous and what his concerns are. And he kind of consistently says that he's worried that he's not doing enough, which is kind of it's a weird kind of paradox for someone who's also constantly kind of talking about how busy their schedule is. And if you've seen his TikTok or his Instagram, he's talked a lot about that. And so I think it was kind of interesting just to hear him talk about this kind of idea that everything has to be make it or break it all the time. And talking to him and picking that apart, he seems to, on one hand, have a lot of confidence in who he is and his ability to sell, and that's definitely very clear. But then as a CEO, there's this other idea of everything, even in the show, he kind of touches on it. He says something about like, there's no plan B, like that's bankruptcy. Right. Even in person, that comes across as like, even though the brokerage is doing well, there's always the like, what if, right. What else can we be doing more? Right. And then I think also there's kind of like an on and off switch. I think in this more recent, show that he's done you kind of see that a little bit, but I definitely, he's a little more low-key in person, I think, than I thought he would be. Taking photos with him and like kind of watching him do that process. I kind of interact with people on the street. Like I can see the kind of right on and off that he does, which was kind of interesting. And I don't think he necessarily hides that. I mean, he kind of jokes about it a little bit, but it was interesting to like watch somebody do that.
So you profiled a title insurer, Riverside Abstract, for our magazine this month. Title insurers usually fly pretty under the radar, but Riverside is a little bit different. Tell me why.
So Riverside was banned by Fannie Mae from closing any new loans as they conduct an investigation, and they provide title insurance on at least 2 separate fraudulent deals that were subject of a Department of Justice investigation, but they have not been charged with any wrongdoing yet.
Right. So that got them a little bit in the public eye. Just to take a step back, can you explain to me what title insurers are supposed to do? Yeah,
so title insurance is kind of an afterthought in real estate business. It's essentially security that, whoever buys the property is the person who is supposed to buy the property, and 2 people can't claim title to the same deed, and also that your property is free and clear of any liens. And then for the lender, title insurance is really important because it ensures that they have a lien on the property, so that in the event of a default or something, they'll get paid back.
Right. But Riverside had expanded pretty far past those sort of simple, title insurance responsibilities.
So Riverside was really a title agency in that they provided title insurance that was underwritten by actual insurers to real estate developers and investors. But yeah, then beyond that, they were in a lot of different businesses and had this kind of entrepreneurship, hustle culture to their business.
So why expand so much? What was the purpose for that?
Well, I think that Riverside, they really just had this hustle culture approach to business. It was like, how can we help our client? And these are kind of ways that they thought they could help the client and make more and more money, because title insurance makes money. It's really a volume game. So if you can't increase the number of transactions you're doing, you got to continue to expand to these other businesses.
Yeah. And then looking at this bigger picture fraud that we've seen, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac cracking down on, and that's playing out at the DOJ. How does Riverside fit in?
So Riverside played an important role in these transactions that were done by Blue Gentlemen and Young Purates. And essentially the scheme was that they would buy a property at a lower price, and then they were able to flip it to themselves at a higher price. They would then get a loan for a larger amount of money than what they actually paid for the property.
Right.
And what Riverside did was very unusual. So not only did they provide title insurance in the first transaction and on the second one for the lender, so they provided one for both the real purchase and the fraudulent purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Riverside actually provided a $30 million bridge loan, a 1-week bridge loan, to make it look like they were capitalized.
Mm-hmm. So is it fair to say that Riverside, in some ways, enabled at least part of this fraud?
Riverside has not been charged with any wrongdoing. There are no charges actively against them, but it is very strange and very, I'd say, dumb that they provided this $30 million bridge loan to show that this person was capitalized when they really weren't.
Right.
I think in their minds, my guess is that they thought they were helping their client, but you're not supposed to do that, because you're kind of the lender, then the lender doesn't really know how much money you actually have.
Right. So looking at this larger landscape of mortgage fraud, do you think there's more of this? Is this a unique situation?
So Riverside has popped up in another case that the DOJ has gone after Aaron Purits somewhere else in the country. They have been the title insurer for a lot of deals that are questionable and deals that have come under scrutiny. Attorneys and people in the industry are definitely concerned. And that's important because Riverside also has this escrow business. There's one lawsuit now where one investor is very concerned about having his money with Riverside.
Right. So suffice to say, we're going to see more news, more of the sort of strangeness of their business play out.
Yeah, I think there'll be more news. We've recently seen a Riverside company change its name in an attempt to tenant distance itself. The company also tried to sell all of its assets to this nursing home mogul. Apparently that sale has been unsuccessful. It's significant because a lot of people, it appears like they're trying to distance themselves from this company. But to be fair, people are just going to go to another title insurer.
Right. Thank you. So, Susie, you wrote about a really particular policy that syndicators use in their business. So tell us what Regulation D is.
Sure. So Regulation D, or Reg D, is a way for investors to raise money with very little oversight from regulators. So the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission in particular here. There's two rules that I want to focus in on within Reg D, and it's a little bit of an alphabet soup, but we can get through it. So one of them is 506B, like banana. That's from the Reagan administration, and basically it said that you can raise money from an unlimited number of accredited investors, and those are folks who are wealthy. They have a net worth of at least $1 million, and they have $200,000 as their annual salary. These, just want to say, these metrics were put in place in the 80s, and they haven't been adjusted for inflation. 506B, you can also raise money from a select number of unaccredited investors, and those are, your average Joes. They don't meet that threshold. So syndicators used 506B for a long time, and then under Obama, we got 506C, and that really opened the floodgates, because with 506C, you could raise money online from accredited investors.
Yeah, and this really opened the floodgates, as you said, helped fuel this boom of syndication that we've seen in the last couple of years. But in a way, Reg D also opened syndicators up to accusations of fraud. Tell me why.
It's sort of two parts, I would say. One part is, there's different rules for each of these rules, 506B, 506C, and if you run afoul of the rules for either, that could be fraud. So for example, if you are marketing online to unaccredited investors, that's no good. But the other big thing is that Reg D is really useful because, it's easy, it's cheap, there's little oversight. So because the SEC isn't necessarily fixating on these, deals that are getting done, syndicators buying multifamily and raising money, it creates this opening for fraud. So it's like, if I'm at home and my parents don't watch TV, I'm a kid in this situation, and then I watch TV, but they don't know, it's sort of it creates that gray area where maybe you can act badly, but no one's looking.
Yeah. But this, 506C especially really changed the game for syndicators, right?
Think about it. 506C was passed in 2012. It didn't really get implemented until 2016. 2016, we have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. 2016 is when TikTok went live. So social media just boomed. You could really tailor these deals to exactly the audience you wanted to. And also, it allowed you to market outside of your social circles for the first time. Right. So that was huge as well.
Are there things that syndicators and investors generally should be doing to make sure that they don't run afoul of any of these fraud accusations?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the big one right now is disclosure, especially because we're seeing some deals go south. Some operators are losing properties to foreclosure. So say I'm an investor and one of those operators is marketing a new deal, which they're also doing. And I don't know that the operator has lost a property or has lost other investors' money. And I find that out later, that could be a reason for me to sue, because I could say, you know, if I knew that, maybe I wouldn't have invested. Right. That's huge. There's other just really big red flags. Guaranteeing returns is a huge one. So you shouldn't be guaranteeing anything in your marketing materials. And then I'd say the last thing, and this again is just like, you know, this is hard fraud. Do not do this. Commingling funds. So plucking money from one deal and using it to prop up another property. But again, we're at a point right now in this cycle where things are going south, and there are reasons why an operator would want to do that, would need to do that. And to restate, if the SEC isn't necessarily looking, you know, that could sort of fuel that behavior.
Right.